Hello and welcome to this edition of Herbalism as Activism, stories of healing, justice, resistance, and change. I am your host Garlic of the Living Medicine Project. You can check out past episodes on my website at livingmedicineproject.com/herbalism-as-activism or by going to the Herbalism as Activism Facebook page. You can leave comments or ask questions at either of those places, and honestly, I would really love it if you did, because it would help me to know that I'm not just doing this project of cool herbal resistance interviews and putting it out to the void of the internet. I'd love to know that people are receiving this and how it's landing for you. So in this edition, I interview my friend Yarrow Willard. Sorry, he prefers the pronunciation, Yarrow Willard. Now, Yarrow is the co-founder of Harmonic Arts Botanical Dispensary, based out of Courtenay in British Columbia. And he's also the co-founder of the Vancouver Island Herb Gathering, which happens to be now the largest herb gathering in Canada, with 300 or so at the last gathering in 2015, and the next gathering coming up in June 2017. Now, in this interview, we start and we end by talking about a really important issue for everybody who wants to be able to buy herbs in Canada. See, in September 2016, Health Canada proposed some changes to the regulations that cover what herbs will be available on store shelves. And it may not seem like a really radical topic, but this legislation is very much a sign of things to come. It gives insight into the pharmaceutical and nutraceutical industry agenda and attacks that will be coming on our personal and collective health sovereignty. Now, because Yarrow and I are both kind of tangential, rambly kind of guys, we do hit on a bunch of different topics, things including the dangers of high concentration single constituent extracts, our personal connection to the land and why that's really important to us, colonialism, and on a broader scale, the global disease industry. So I hope you enjoy this interview with Yarrow Willard.
I watch the madness of the world below, and she laughs and tells me that it's temporary. Underneath the wild garden waits to grow.
Hello, and welcome to this edition of Herbalism as Activism, stories of healing, justice, resistance, and change. I am your host, Garlic, and today I am here chatting with Yarrow Willard of Harmonic Arts. I guess the official name, everybody knows it as Harmonic Arts, but it's Harmonic Arts Botanical Dispensary.
Mm-hmm.
And so thank you for being here, Yarrow.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah.
Happy to share some space with you, Garlic. I'm definitely excited for you to be having this podcast and to be bringing this kind of information forward. I think it's perfect timing, and people are really ripe to receive. How do we connect with plants? How do we make them and use them as an initiative, especially for activism and especially for being the change in the world we want to see?
Yeah. Well, just let me just give a little background on this here. Is that for me, when I went through herb school, and a lot of the herbalists that I've met, there's and you've probably experienced this as well, but there's like an awareness. Maybe it's not even there's a motivation, even though it seems not always entirely aware that herbs are a political act. That using herbs, that our study of herbs, that is. It's even in the least political people that I've met, there's something about it that's like, oh, it strung me back to the earth. There's some sort of balance that I'm studying herbs. I want to learn about herbal medicine. It's not just a theoretical kind of health thing or a health practice, but there's something deeper and there's something more to it. And I know that there's tons of people who have done all kinds of different, interesting, creative projects where they've supported them with herbs, and started businesses and different things. And so want to bring those stories together. And I'm really excited to have you on and to bring some of your story into this.
I'm happy to share. Yeah. And I definitely would agree that, like, one thing that's been so neat to me to see over the years is the types of people that herbs draw in and are attracted to. It's like every kind of person. It's not just like this like weird subcult of crazy people like you and me, maybe, but it's actually like the moms and the pops and the older people and the younger generation. And there's something about it that is like an entire, almost like, hey, let's step out of what type of political agenda might be around us and actually get back into who we are, and it's an empowerment piece that people learn how to be their own healer and how to connect with the planet and ways in which they can build relationships beyond this kind of infrastructure of a sociological society we have now. And I think it's brilliant because it stems into our history of humanity in a much more profound way than just what's going on with our dramas and traumas on the surface of our society.
Yeah. So today we do want to talk about some of those dramas and traumas.
Sure.
Right?
Because they come up.
Because they come up. And, my vision, it's interesting, my vision for this podcast was more about grassroots kind of activism that I thought I would be covering. But then I think that this, even though, so I want to talk to you about the natural health products, the proposed changes to the natural health products regulations with Health Canada, which on some level seems like it could be dry and kind of bureaucratic. But I think that it actually has the potential to have a huge impact on herb lovers in Canada. Or
it's a big thing, and it's something that if herb lovers and people who are herbally minded don't speak up about, will get run over them, and it's like we're seeing it on a lot of levels right now. There's a big gray zone that's slowly being filled into this black and white picture that is maybe not the picture we had hoped for, and so we have to be aware of what's going on that way. That narrative in the government is shifting right now, and unless we say our influence of what we actually want to see in the way of protecting plant medicine, they'll just get treated like every other non-prescription drug, and that's a sad world to be in that sense. It takes a lot of the heart and a lot of the real medicine out of the plants.
Yeah. Yeah, it kind of bleaches it, right?
Yeah, kind of, and it's been a long-term agenda, so it's nothing new, but it's got some new, fuel with this whole NHP shift up and a whole World Health agenda that's trying to be put in place right now. We have to remember that the top, most successful, richest companies on the planet are pharmaceutical companies, above the oil and gas companies. And yes, they might have shares in some of that, but there's a lot of money behind a World Health agenda. And herbalism is kind of
let's name it accurately, right? It's the World Disease Maintenance Agenda.
Yeah. I guess that is more accurate to it. It makes money, the disease agenda. Disassociation breeds fear, creates this ability to have solutions. This stems beyond just this industry, but health in particular is one of those places that we can hold a lot of empowerment or a lot of disempowerment, and
right.
It's like, which one is it?
So let me just do a recap so that folks who are listening here have a sense of what we're talking about. On September 8th, 2016, so that's like 6 months ago, Health Canada released the Consulting Canadians on the Regulation of Self-Care Products in Canada, which proposes changes that could significantly alter the way that natural health products are regulated. And it seems like there's three main areas that it would change. One, it would reduce product oversight and testing. Two, it would remove information from labels, or create more strict restrictions about what can go on herb product labels. And three, it seems like one of the impacts is going to be it will increase the cost of herbs.
That's what they say on their website, or what they kind of but those are all possible pluses as much as they're minuses. What I've seen that's really trying to happen here is a standardization to a place where we can now, instead of it being the herb, it's got to be a studied, double-blinded, placebo-controlled study that validates the product. Therefore, it's actually the chemical constituent that they want to regulate, which can be synthetically made, and that's where the claims can be made, whereas an actual herb can't have that. So there's a bigger picture beyond what they're telling us here, and that's part of the problem, is that it actually, even right now with what Health Canada has had, and to take a step backwards, in 2004, I think the initial mandate went out for the NHPs, and it was huge. What a drama and trauma to the industry of natural medicine. Millions upon millions upon millions of dollars were spent, hundreds of thousands of hours by each company to get up to a level where they could actually apply and comply to the standards. And then it came to a place where it's like, oh, wait a minute, this actually sort of works, because now we can see safe products. Like, there is some benefit to that, and it can be good for consumers. And then now what they're going to do is, or they're looking to do, is radically change that again and scrape off even more products,
right.
Which is, it's really challenging because there's no room for innovation then. There's really no room for anything that hasn't been a multi-million-dollar investment to bring to market.
Right.
And that means grassroots herbalism is all of illegal or dead,
Right. Well, and that's, it seems to me, so I just before I get into that response, I want to just say that bit that I just read there is from the Canadian Health Food Association. And that's the link of Terry Willard's video about the people trying to resist these proposed changes.
Which is a great video, and you guys should all check that out if you're wanting to learn more about this. Yeah,
I can link to it. I actually thought it was a hilarious video. Your dad seems really funny in that.
He's pretty funny, yeah.
And it seems like, they give these examples on the Canadian Health Food Association page there of how labels would change. Mm-hmm. Where it would just say, now it's an antioxidant. Turmeric would be labeled as an antioxidant, and that's it. Mm-hmm. And you wouldn't be allowed to put any other information on there. And
there's a challenge. There's two-piece challenge here. The biggest one is that, it can only, turmeric. Yeah, turmeric might survive as an antioxidant, but you go to use anything beyond turmeric, something that might not have been studied as well, and it's off the table. Right. There's a big reduction down to top 20 magic bullet herbs, and that's
right.
it. Right. Which is really confining. It means that if you have a different species in your local area that you want to work with, but it wasn't validated with this double-blinded placebo-controlled study, you can't bring it to market.
Right.
It's not possible.
Right.
And that's the biggest issue I see.
Right. I mean, there's a bunch of history there about the last regulation that went into effect that demanded all of these natural health product numbers, right? And you touched on that a little bit. That had a big impact on grassroots herbalism as well.
Yeah.
And now it seems like they're trying to restrict that even more, is what you're saying, to eliminate traditional use or traditional knowledge as a valid source of credential for any of these herbs. So that if you've got, let's say willow, the willow that's in the market is Salix alba, right? White willow. It's a European variety. Doesn't grow on the West Coast where you and I live.
Yeah.
Lots of different types of willows, really effective medicine. And, I actually tend to use weeping willow just because it's really easy to find. I found out just recently that it's actually hybridized with white willow. And so it's got higher counts of salicylic acid in it than other varieties of willow. But, I've used any willow that I find in a river valley, to make tea, to treat a wound, to even tincture at times. And I find that it works just fine. And so it sounds like what you're saying is that the Salix Douglasii or whatever, I don't even know if that exists, but Douglas
that variety would be invalidated.
You couldn't get an natural health product number to take it to market because there's not enough studies on that particular variety. Mm-hmm. Even though traditional use has always said willow is willow is willow. Yeah. Right.
And that's a big. There's a few levels of debate here that can kind of are in place right now, because it is this disempowerment at that smaller level. Even lots of grassroots farmers market booths are being vetted and be like, wait a minute, you can't sell this. And it's like, come on, my community wants local herbs from my local area. So the the policing isn't fully there, but it's starting to get there. And that's where the challenge is that people don't mind making medicine for their own use. But as soon as some authority comes and says, you're now like doing something illegal, this really poses a question inside our minds. Like, are we ethical? Are we not? Are we like of the planet, or are we of the pharmaceutical chemical soup?
Right.
You know?
Right. Well, I hope that most of our listeners to this interview are going to recognize that that there's a significant difference there. You know, that what is legal and what is ethical actually have very little overplay. I trust this audience to not be confused by that. But I can see it puts a pressure on us, even if we're not confused by that. Of like, well, now my medicine is a direct action. Now it's civil disobedience for me to sell this herb. Now I understand that the laws right now allow an herbalist to sell any herbs, any variety, directly to their clients.
Yes. Just
not through a store or online, like not
in
the
a
general public
format.
Right.
Yeah, and that's true, and that there is a legitimate safety concern there, you know, like, and I can totally understand that, and I want to give props to like Health Canada for at least trying to address that. And as much as like the system that we have in place right now is kind of takes some of that power away from the end consumer to be able to choose, and from the herbalist to be able to create, it at least does cover some basic safety restrictions. It's just that now, once that, and this system we have right now, it may not be perfect, but at least it's kind of working to help keep some legitimacy to natural health products. But
it's kind of working for the companies like yourself who have been able to adapt to those changes, right? It's not working for the herbalists who were shut down because they had small shops and only sold to a small number of people. Because now every tincture you make, you need to have it tested, right?
It's crazy and it's expensive.
Right.
And like you have to have a site license, which in itself is of GMP practices, which are good, the good manufacturing practices that are safety concerns. But literally, you stick a herb in alcohol to make a tincture, you're not getting any Staphylococcus and E. coli and like these things are destroyed, denatured. So like some of those safety concerns are actually not legitimate.
Right.
In that sense.
Are you saying that staph can't survive in 95% ethanol?
No, pickled staph. I mean, we have pickled staph at work. No, I'm just kidding. No, but and so yeah, as it works sort of for us. I mean, it's cost our company, for example, I don't know, for the last 2-3 years, $40,000-$50,000 a year, just trying to like comply and make this happen, and we're still even like barely scraping this. Like, unless you are a like large producer, like we're at the bottom of that smallest fish in that pond, it's really not feasible to bring a product to market, you know, and to do that. So there is a big disempowerment there. But Canada, and the reason why I say but is because Canada is the one country in the world that has actually gone through this process and come out with some kind of like level of a bunch of products that they feel are safe and have compliance and can actually make some form of claim. There's nowhere else on the planet that's even gotten that, and then the new agenda that's been placed on as of September is to fit into a model that fits with a larger disease control kind of a state with the planet, which actually restricts way further than we already have, and what we have already is quite far restricted. So
yeah. Well, and as I was saying in our pre-interview chit-chat there is that, you know, I've seen this stuff coming for a while, which is why 10 years ago I opened an herb school so that I could focus on teaching people the skills of doing this stuff, because they can make comfrey illegal, but it grows really well, and they're never actually going to get rid of the plant from everybody's backyard and everybody's garden. And, you know, like, and so as long as the plants are there, people have the knowledge, then they can, you know, covertly, and I think even legally, harvest and use themselves, right? It's really, what we're talking about here is more like what makes it to market, what makes it to the store shelves.
Yeah, and I mean, like, I understand with some nutraceuticals where you have these concentrated extracts of plants put into vitamins, like there's a safety issue where it's not a traditional use, but a straight herbal tincture or a herbal formula where it's like a cleansing tea or a liver supporting tincture, these things, they're safe. There shouldn't be such a high restriction and regulation. Mm-hmm. It really just takes away from our ethnic diversity and our cultural diversity and our unique kind of creativity aspect, of this generation.
Right.
So,
now, going back to the sort of industrialized thing that we were talking about there in terms of like having these tests in place to try to prevent people from getting sick. Mm-hmm. I think that to make sure that they're safe, it makes sense. Sandor Katz, who I'm sure you know either personally or at least have read his books.
Great.
The fermentation guy. Yeah. But he presented an idea that really blew my mind when he was talking about milk production and milk processing. Yeah. And he pointed out that actually having smaller, more local batches, whether it's milk or even whether it's tinctures, mm-hmm. Actually reduces the number of people who could get sick from a bad batch.
Well, yeah,
right. Because it's not that bad batches don't happen, but you don't have to recall 5 million boxes of sprouts that have salmonella that are spread all over North America.
Totally.
If you have sprouting companies in every town, it could be that there's a bad batch. Somebody gets some salmonella from it, but it's a couple of dozen people, and it's not actually spreading beyond that. Yeah. And so I think I wanted to sort of present that as a contrast, even with what another way to look at safety that Health Canada has kind of skipped past there, because I think that there is some aspect of smaller dispensaries making local product and using them locally.
So usually the best. I mean, I know for myself, like when I bring in herbs, even if it's like amazing herbs like ashwagandha from India, I'm like, okay, well, sure, this is an amazing herb that we can work with, but if I found something local that I freshly harvested, that I processed myself, I have so much more understanding of everything behind it. Therefore, the quality, no matter what, the quality is going to be higher because I've actually been able to put that loving care and attention into it, and it's more transparent for me. I feel better about it. I know what it is, and I can share that, and it's actually a better health product in the end.
And the other piece is that you have the opportunity to get consent.
Yeah.
Right? Which it might sound funny to some folks to think about getting consent from a plant before you harvest it. But there's a process that a lot of us take before our clippers snip anything off or our shovel hits the ground, where we make an offering, whether it's tobacco or hair or water or, people have all kinds of traditions.
Hairs from all the hairs I give to plants.
Right? And so you do that, and I find consistently that we don't take plants that we get a sense don't want to come with us, right? And that it's an immeasurable impact, because now the relationship that you have with that plant is consensual in a way that it's giving itself to you and you get to receive it, And
you become a caretaker of those plants, and that's a whole different story. It's just a whole nother piece. Anybody who harvests plants, even if they don't understand the idea of taking the time, offering yourself, slowing down, connecting with this sort of plant spirit medicine of the plant, they'll realize pretty quick that if you don't do it sustainably, you lose your beautiful plants you want to work with. So you become more of a gardener or a fosterer of that patch of that plant itself, and that connection is beautiful. Like no matter who you are, you start to appreciate that. No matter what background you come from, as soon as there's that piece always presents itself as a really awesome learning and healing opportunity for people.
Yeah, yeah, and I think that there's also a deeper reach that the plant has in our healing. Right, it can take it beyond physical healing into touching on some of our mental, emotional, spiritual sides, which ultimately not only tends to be the cause for more serious disease, but it's what we feel good about. If we have meaning in our lives, then we actually feel much better than if we're just out of digestive pain. I mean, both are important, right?
For sure, but why was the digestive pain there to begin with?
Absolutely,
and where did that come from? And then how? Yeah, there's so much layers to our onion, and I think that's one thing that herbalism really embraces is this holism, and plant connections give us more. Like there's a lot more to that too. So, and that is lost in big industry. It really is. Even in a small company like mine, it's very hard to transfer. We do little things to try and like boost that up and bring that energy of the plant spirit to the medicine to stay with the medicine as it reaches the person. But it's even there. It's challenging. The bigger anything gets like that, the more the infrastructure, the demand for distribution, like the more challenging that becomes. And our whole food industry is a classic example of this. And we don't really want to see medicines and plant medicines go the way of the like food industry, as you know.
Right.
That's like
Willie says, here's a story that you may not comprehend, but the forest here will rise and bloom again. There's a world beneath the pavement.
Hi, this is Garlic, sneaking in for a little word from our sponsor kind of moment. Since that's me, I'm going to take a quick moment to plug some of my work and let you know about what I do. So I'm doing this podcast as part of the Living Medicine Project, which is weaving together herbal medicine, empathy, and nature connection for personal and community healing. I work one-on-one with a lot of parents, activists, and other change-maker types who either want to treat or prevent burnout, or they just need more support themselves. And they find the combination of herbal healing, empathic listening, and nature connection not only helpful in their healing, but empowering because of how it aligns with their values. I also teach live classes online and in-person classes in Nelson and Vancouver, BC. And for the activisty folks listening to this, I want to quickly tell you about 2 web classes coming up that I think you'll be interested in. The first is called Herbal Self-Care for Radicals, Activists, and Organizers: How to Sustain Yourself and Your Activism Using Herbal Healing, Empathy, and Deep Nature Connection. It's a 6-week teleclass that will show you how and why herbs, empathy, and nature connection must play a major role in our lives and our justice work. That will start mid to late April of 2017. The second class I want to tell you about, I'm actually still putting together. It's called Dealing with Anger in the Face of Injustice, and it will also be a 6-week web class focused on finding the gift within anger. This class also combines herbs, empathy, and nature connection, but this time to process, harness, and transform anger into a more grounded energy and even a brilliant source of creativity and healing. That class will launch this summer and start in early September 2017. You can find out more about these and other classes by visiting livingmedicineproject.com/upcoming-classes. That's upcoming classes with a little hyphen in the middle. All right, that's my plug. Now back to your interview. Thanks.
The seeds are lying dormant, it will never end.
Yeah, and to tie it back, to talking about these NHP regulations, one of the other metaphors that fits there is the midwife, the way that the industrialization or the colonization of midwifery. I don't know if you're familiar, because it sounds like that's the direction that this new legislation is kind of pointing, in only recognizing repeatable, verifiable scientific study. It removes the other pieces that are really helpful.
Huge. But to be clear, most of those studies, those scientific double-blind and placebo-controlled studies, they're heavily funded by financial agendas. This isn't necessarily something you're just like, oh, wow, out of the goodness of my heart, I want to check out Devil's Club and really give it the science it deserves. Like, right. No. Unless you have a financial agenda and $100,000 to study this plant for your own gains, they don't get that kind of research. And that's that's where the limiting and the sort of behind the story picture starts to become a much crystal clear in our eyes. Is like, wait a minute, you aren't going to get this kind of validation for plants that have real healing powers. You're going to get them for plants that are really marketable.
Right.
You know? And that's...
or that are a threat, right? So
right.
The plant, I believe, I don't know if it's currently the case, it's been a while since I heard this, but the plant that's had the most scientific study, at least in the recent times, is St. John's wort, Hypericum perforatum, right? And who did those studies and why?
Yeah, and that's big pharma.
Right,
you know?
It's big pharma because they were worried, oh my God, all these people are using this as an antidepressant, and they did all these studies to prove that it's not a good antidepressant.
Yeah.
And ultimately they got to a place, there was enough peer review stuff. It hit the cover of the New York Times. St. John's wort ineffective against severe depression. Right. And in that study that they're citing, they didn't mention that St. John's wort did better than the pharmaceuticals at mild and moderate depression, and that also the pharmaceuticals had no effect on severe depression. Right? So nothing works on severe depression, but they've used it to debunk St. John's wort in their eyes. Right? And the
Japanese would say, go forest bathing. Works on severe depression. Go spend time in the nature. But I hear you in the sense that those studies are either done to debunk herbs often or to look at specific chemical markers that might be patented, might be able to be synthesized, might be able to be at least extracted and proprietarily created a product out of. And that's like the NHP used to be natural health products. It's now gone to an NHP, which is non-prescription health products kind of thing. So it's like they've sort of switched it slightly to be like, oh, so now it fits with Tylenol, and now it's like, and so there's and then the people who are behind the scenes, like even when we send in our documentation to get a new product, it's not reviewed by people who know anything about herbs. It's reviewed strictly by pharmacists, So they're really looking for editing mistakes and for any way they can invalidate this, and that's a challenge, that way, because these people don't even know about these plants. And yet this agenda has this is the most, these are the people we consider to be the best opinions to regulate stuff.
Yeah.
And even just as a little more background, this whole, my dad has been working with this whole thing for 20 years. And over that time, they have seen the staff turnover at Health Canada, through the roof, where it's this cycling every couple of years. It's new, different people. People are stressed out by this whole NHP thing because of the industry just complaining like crazy at them about what's going on, that they quit or get fired or leave. And so there's not even any consistency at the government level over the last decade, let alone 20 years, let alone even 5 years. So there's a challenge there too, where these people are inexperienced with these products, plus they're inexperienced with their own processes.
Right. They're still learning the job. Yeah, that's interesting. I always find it a little bit funny when people say, oh, I'm going to go ask my doctor about these herbs that you're suggesting and see if they think that they'll mix well. And I'm like, you need to talk to an herbalist about that, because we're the ones, for the most part, who have better resources to know about contraindications and things not mixing or negative effects with pharmaceuticals. Whereas the people who are experts in pharmaceuticals, they don't know anything about how skullcap's going to interact with your SSRI or your your Lipitor.
It's probably my least favorite disclaimer out there in the herbal world is, please ask your doctor if on any pharmaceutical or on any or pregnant or anything. Just ask your doctor about this, because it is challenging. Like they have no idea. They have no idea. And yet the herbalists often don't have much idea about the pharmaceuticals. There's a few books. I got a few books on it, and I think the world is due for a bit more of a herbally infused plant drug interaction course, but
Right.
To be clear, we offer one at Wild Rose College, but it's still like this stuff is changing radically and fast. And in the 80s and 90s, herbs didn't work according to the modern media and according to the doctors. They just didn't work. Plant medicine doesn't work. Come 2000, all of a sudden, it's becoming popularized. Now it works. Oh my gosh, what are we going to do? Now it interacts with our pharmaceuticals. You hear very little about two different pharmaceuticals interacting with each other as much as you hear about a herb and a pharmaceutical interacting. And now it's a threat. And so these kind of regulations have come into place really to save the butts of a pharmaceutical industry which kills more people than even cars,
Right. Yeah. Yeah, I don't know the statistics anymore, but I have known like the number of people. It's huge, the number of people who die in Canada and in the U.S. from taking the pills that the doctor has given them in the way the doctor prescribed.
And even if they don't die, they suffer and they have major side effects. And it's just the nature of taking this kind of concentrated extract outside of its natural form. It's like those plants have buffers in them to a degree that'll help. So you're not getting such a high dose of one chemical compound, and that's really hard on the body. It just is, no matter what.
Right, because that's not like our digestive tracts. Our bodies are designed, co-evolved to take plants in and animals as food, and the chemistry, the concentration in there makes sense to our bodies. They can take it apart. They can send it to different parts of the body. They can do healing. They can do this and that, dispose of what's not needed. And when you take it, sometimes I even wonder whether this is the case with tinctures. And I don't think it's so much the case with tinctures, although I'm seeing some, I have a feeling that with essential oils, they're starting to get concentrated to a point where the body, where the ecosystem can't actually make sense of them because it's just like they're really loud. The sort of auditory aspect of their meaning of your body trying to make sense of the chemicals. Because they say, science tells us that a vitamin C chemical is a vitamin C chemical is a vitamin C chemical, whether they made it in a lab or whether it's in your apple or your rose hips. But it's not at all, right? Because the plant makes that chemical in response to some perturbation, to some challenge in the environment. The plant makes that chemical, another way to say that, is as part of a conversation with the living world around them. That chemical is a response to too much heat, too much water, infestation, there's a bug, there's bacteria, virus, whatever. And all of the chemicals the plant creates are in dialogue with the living world around them, which is very different from what's made in a laboratory.
For sure. And like, to be clear, every plant that produces vitamin C, it's a great example, produces a schwackload of these bioflavonoids to go along with it.
Right.
And we've seen time and time again, the synthetic vitamin C does not absorb properly. It turns into urine. It literally just the body goes, what the fuck is this? Sorry, excuse my language, but moves it right through. Whereas the flavonoids, and it's like, okay, now I know what to do with this. I got some antioxidant protection. I got some. So it becomes, and that's just that's like the simplest example, but that's how the world works.
Right. So it sounds like where we're going here is that our critique around this proposal with Health Canada and sort of with the scientific community in general, it's not about science. It's about bad, narrow-minded science, right?
Yeah.
Because they're not actually looking at things in a holistic way where they're taking these things into consideration, which to me sounds like good holistic science to me. To recognize that plants are producing these chemicals as sets of chemicals that work together.
For sure.
It's not a single constituent that you can just extract, blow up 1,000 times, and then inject into somebody.
And, you'll probably see when you do that on a 30-day trial that it worked. Oh my God, but you didn't follow that person for 5 years down the road and notice the kidney stones or notice the high blood pressure or notice the other issues that came up with it, with that concentrated extract for that huge high volume time.
Right.
There's just not enough time to do that kind of study, and we're in a world where we don't even know.
Oh, there's time. I think, in fairness, I think there's been time.
Well, with a lot of the things we've seen this is what I mean.
Not the motivation.
The market there's not enough time to actually look at that. You know, like they're like, well, we need to get this to market. 30-day study, perfect. 2 years down the road, people are falling apart. You know,
Right.
Like we're being guinea pigs for a pharmaceutical industry, whereas these plants, they may not be scientifically studied at the same level, but the 5,000 years of traditional use behind some of these, like that's more validation than you could ever do in science in that sense.
I understand the idea of potentially disregarding, people's individual stories. But when you get enough of a collection of people's personal stories about plants and how they've worked, even if you don't have the science to back it up, you can start to recognize, all right, 5,000 years of people who've been working with ginseng have modified it in this way through, Chinese medicine, and it consistently has this effect. And, let's call some of that valid, even though those weren't double-blind studies done by, the farmers who were taking the ginseng.
Right? Well, they're not like, oh yeah, I got $3 million to shovel at ginseng so that I can put it in my soup with my chicken bones,
Yeah, exactly. And this knowledge predates even that concept. That's one of the other things I find challenging about science, is that their blinders are often like, this is the only way, this is how it's always been. And it's totally not, It's a worldview that strips the world of emotion and spirit, that's actually only been around 100, maybe 150 years, and it's in contrast with the indigenous worldviews that we hear from all over the place, that the world is alive, that plants have spirits, that animals have spirits, that rivers can heal, that lakes can bring spiritual healing and physical healing, and it's just really inconsistent with most of human history. Totally. And now it's being bombarded, or we're being bombarded with this is the only frame with which to look through. And
that's a challenge.
Yeah.
Quick cut.
Yep.
I just saw a delay in your voice, so I don't know if it resets or how that.
I don't know. It's a little glitchy. We'll see.
Yeah. That's fine.
We'll see in post how it goes.
Yeah, it's good. But yeah, okay. So back to that. That's the for science's argument, I just want to put this out there that I can see how it's hard to rationalize this idea of spirit when you can't see it. Like I can understand that people are skeptical that way. But there actually is new edge science, or I'll call it growing edge science, that is starting to show this, like auric field of a plant, or like radiant energy for the first little bit before it's harvested, once it's harvested, and then it slowly dies away. These traditional healers, they're starting to look at them and see like that this person is glowing in these different ways. There's a lot more of this is actually becoming validated as that sort of growing edge, new edge science comes into place. That I think we're at a stage in science right now where we're looking so narrow and trying to break things apart, and it will come to a place eventually. It's just that we don't want to lose it all in this process, If we don't protect the things that we see from traditional wisdoms, they won't be around when the science actually evolves to a place where it can understand and conceptualize these concepts of holism.
And not just dismiss them as superstitions or superstitious perspectives by unintelligent or barbaric people, which ties in. Then we need to, what we're doing there is naming colonialism, right? And so we need to talk about the racial implications of the class and race of Western science. And how they're looking at indigenous peoples all over the world, all skin colors, and saying that no, that's superstition, that you used to dig up this root and now you have to take this pill.
And what a loss to the real story of our planet, of our species. What a loss that is. And like I think of that with languages, how many traditional cultures have lost their language, which describes how they actually related to the world. It's so hard in English. There's a concept of something called mouthfeel, which is not taste, right? But there's no real descriptive words for mouthfeel properly in English, whereas in many traditional cultures, mouthfeel, which is like the texture within the mouth that something has all these descriptive words for it. Like when you start to homogenize things, we lose, I just think of English as this, just one of those things that one bothers me a lot, is like, there's very little, like I could say, oh, it has a nutty flavor, or oh, it's kind of chewy, but I don't have the same kind of descriptive words to really understand what's going on in my mouth when I put this plant in my body. And it has to do with the language barrier. My body understands it, my mind, my heart understand it, but my language barrier doesn't allow for it to be easily communicated in the modern world. And people just are like, well, what do you mean? It tastes spicy to me. Well, no, but there's like a texture and a mouthfeel to that, and it hits here and it rolls back around and it sweeps back up into my nose and it comes out,
right.
We lose touch with some of those describers of our experience,
right.
Our real experience with plants. Yeah.
Yeah, and with lots of things. I think I do a lot, I tend to do a lot of emotional support work paired with my herbal healing work. Just going to close my door here. I think my phone's ringing in the background. And so, yeah, I realize the same level of sort of atrophy has happened with people's awareness around emotions. You ask somebody how they're doing and it's like fine or good, or maybe they're angry or maybe they're sad, but are they morose? Are they, there's a loss of subtlety and nuance within a lot of our lives. And a lot of that's physical. Right? It's how we physically relate to the world, how we emotionally relate to the world. Those words are gone or are around, but we don't use them. They're not educated. We're not educated in them.
That's that emotional intelligence you're talking about earlier, that like, how do we, and we're growing as a society. Like, I'm a bit optimistic here, but I have this belief that like there is a group of people who are growing their awareness around, wait a minute, something's been wrong for a long time. It's not like this is a new problem. It's up to us to change it. We can't rely on our government. We can't rely on our social infrastructure to do this. We have to create this change ourselves. And that's a beautiful thing, because really logically, and if we look back to history, this kind of tribal mentality of a smaller group coming together and making decisions for the betterment of each other is much more in alignment than the way our society is set up right now. And to go back to this whole world health or disease infrastructure that's put in place, it really paints this one picture that doesn't allow for any room and any flexibility for people to choose their own adventure. And health is the biggest aspect of that adventure that we have a bit of power over. And if we give that up readily, it's gone. We lose that. Right.
Yeah. Because I think because herbs and food, for me, they go hand in hand, as opposed to food being separate from the way that it is from pharmaceuticals or from, it's just this separate thing. The idea that our health is related to the things we put in our body gets lost, and we get disease because, I don't know, bad luck.
Yeah.
You got this.
I can understand the idea of, in the old world, it was evil wind that came in, and I can see how they could be like, what do you mean evil wind? Yet I've totally had evil wind. I come in to my life, you're like, that crink in the neck, evil wind, right. But it had a lot to do with where I was feeling and thinking and stress levels and this, and if I actually trace it back, there's a real cause there, and yet herbs are a food medicine, so. And that's one thing that I wanted to mention with that NPN, NHP stuff is that they haven't, the one beautiful thing about it is that like straight up physical herbs are technically in the food category.
Oh,
so
that's good.
They don't have that same agenda, or they don't have the same construct. It's just when you put a herb in a capsule, so AKA you powdered it. Now it's a drug or a non-prescription drug,
right.
Or you put it into a tincture, or you do any kind of extraction of it in any way. Then it becomes this natural health.
Where powdering is an extraction, according to their definition.
It is.
I'm sorry, sir. You cut that up too small. I'm afraid it's now illegal.
Yeah. And the only medicinal compound in there is the gelatin in the capsule. No.
Right. That's really interesting. I didn't know that about encapsulation and stuff. So, yeah. I mean, the downside, I guess there's a positive there. The downside is that I guess your company is producing, like sharing bulk dry herbs. I even saw them in our co-op here just recently. I was like, oh, I didn't realize you had the reach in dry bulk herbs all the way out here. I don't know. I've always been disappointed with frontier herbs. Their herbs are shit.
That's why we started our company, partly was because we were disappointed. Like, I worked the bulk department of a herbal dispensary for like 2-3 years while I was going to herb school, and I was disappointed. There was a couple small farms I really liked, and I always wanted their herbs, but the majority of suppliers were like, oh man, how is this really going to be medicine for people if it's not processed properly and quality organics and fresh, But like bulk herbs, so yeah, they're still safe in that sense for from the regulatory bodies,
right?
But limited, and there's a limit to how you can use them and work with them in the same way. And then for people who like, it's a compliance issue. Like, I want this person down the road who has parasites to be able to take something that they can work with on a regular basis, easily in their lifestyle. It's not going to be this like, okay, you know what, you've got to go pick this, and on the full moon you got to do this and that, and like, there's not this. And even though there should be some regime around it, if herbs only work if the compliance is there.
If they don't take them.
Yeah, if they don't take.
If people don't take the herbs, they don't work.
No.
Yeah.
You need a study to tell you that one.
Yeah. And it's one of the reasons that I have tended also towards to tinctures being a big bulk of my own medicine making, because I find it really convenient for myself and for other people to squirt some tincture into a little bit of water and take that, as opposed to brewing up a liter of tea a day or more, or grinding that fresh black walnut into your oatmeal.
Yeah. There's a number of ways in that. Like, I'm not a fan of capsules, and it's only because I watched my dad eat like handfuls of capsules every day while I was a kid, and I was like, oh, I don't want to do that. But I see the compliance thing there, where it's like it's easy for people to actually take these herbs. Now, they're not associated. I know we should taste them, and there's a huge piece of the medicine that's transferred versus our organoleptic sensory perception.
Yeah.
So that's all lost in that. But it's still better than not taking anything. So those compliance issues are up there as part of the agenda. That's like, how do you get herbs into people that actually work? If every herb is regulated in this way that treats it like a non-prescription drug, it's like, that's, yeah.
Yeah. So what can people do about this? That's what kind of resistance is forming. I know, and I'll put the link to the site that I was studying off of that is encouraging people to write to their MPs.
Yeah.
But
so
what else?
I'll give you a little history, or not a history, but like just this last 8 months kind of like history of September. This agenda just hit. Boom, right at so the CHFA in Canada is the Canadian Health Food Association, and they kind of are like a lobby government, or not really government, but like a lobby group / co-op community of herbal and health and natural product producers in that sense.
Right.
They have a couple trade shows every year for wholesale and health food stores, and that's where most of the health food stores get all their products from. Is from that kind of grouping. Anyway, right around this time of their Toronto show in September, that's when this new agenda kind of hit. And they have luckily all kinds of lawyers and stuff in place who helped like create some paperwork and things that you can send into MPs and send into government. And this proposed bill got lobbied more than anything they have ever proposed. Like, this is literally a Canadian record of people who this is one of the issues too, is that they give you 30 days. Okay, you got 30 days to state your claim. Is there any problem with this new regulation? And it's like, well, that's not enough time to even get the word out there. But luckily, with this association being as large as it was, they just put that front out to everybody's awareness of like, look, this is a problem. This is a major issue coming up. So lots of waivers were sent, and I think it was something like, I don't remember the numbers, but they're out there somewhere, but like 32,000, written letters to these MPs each, and it was a massive amount of people. So they stopped real quick. Like, the government just literally in November shut the whole thing up and have been playing the silent game for the last 3 months kind of thing. Now it's February, because there was such a throwback from the industry and from the consumers more than any other thing. Taking away our health claims or our health rights is a big issue, right? I mean, we're already subject to so many other the pharmaceuticals and the types of foods that are subsidized for our industry standards, like the grains and the milks, and so taking away traditional health rights was a big issue. So we don't know where we stand now. At this point, they've been shut up in a way, and they're kind of waiting till it blows over to make another pass at this.
Right. And
the kind of backstory to all this, and so what can people do? They can write their MPs. They can send in message saying we don't agree with this, and there's definitely links on the CHFA's website. Even next, I think it's April's edition of Common Ground, which will be in a couple months, is all focused on this. And Common Ground's a free magazine in Vancouver and just around West Coast. They'll have a bunch of different ways in which you can act and reach out. But writing a personal letter to your MP is probably the best way. But they're not really reading these because they're getting so much of them. It's just like, put them on the pile and burn it,
Right.
They know it's not what people want.
Right.
So at this point, it's like simmered down to like, let's try and not have people talk about this issue. Because where it really stemmed from, and this is a bit of a hypothesis, this part, but is that there's an agenda on this planet for that disease state. And Canada, having one of the only actual like tried and tested regulatory bodies, is the only country preventing that whole world agenda in this sense. So World Health Organization is looking to really standardize the way in which this occurs on the planet. It's the biggest industry. Beyond water and gas is phasing out, health is the biggest industry on this planet. And so a standardized approach to health that allows for synthetic extracted compounds from herbs to be the major measured dosage is what they're looking for. And this idea of then having like low dosage over the counter and high doses by prescription of synthetic compounds for our health is the agenda that is trying to be put in place. So you don't use plants, you use the extract of hypericin from the St. John's wort, but we'll only give you this much over the counter. You need a prescription for that much. This is the scary frontier that's being envisioned to create a financial and a power control over people.
Right.
So and Canada is one of the only places that's actually holding that back because of our regulations that are already in place. We already have something that works, whereas the rest of the world's still trying to figure this out. In Europe, it's interesting. Some of the herb conferences there, they even revere Canada as like, wow, I can't believe how much they've actually done in this realm to protect medicines.
Right.
Despite herbalists like myself and yourself seeing some disempowerment from this like system that's in place, it's actually one of the only ones in the world that actually is actually stopping this larger agenda from us, the pharmaceutical industry.
Interesting.
So, like, if you go through the states right now, with the way the FDA has been approaching this, they're like on a mission. They're cutting out small grassroots herbalists like there's no tomorrow. They're going in almost like that, you see in the movies where they got the SWAT team that comes in and they like take out the bad guy.
Right.
That kind of mentality around.
Quick, get the acupuncturist in the back room.
He's threatening, national security here.
Yeah. Too much chi.
Yeah. So it's a scary world for plant medicine unless the plant activists speak up for it. We're in turbulent times right now.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So
it's interesting because it goes too with the colonization of the land, with these other things that are happening, with the forest being cut down, with the indigenous peoples of North America. Like you look at Standing Rock and other places, like that land is being taken away. That land is being, their waters being taken, their land's being poisoned.
And it's from this strict agenda of like, well, it makes more financial sense to send a pipe through here versus send trucks on a road. And I like on some level I can understand where they're trying to come from, but the disasters that occur from that, the standardization based on a financial gain, always ends us in having to pay for it later. You got to pay the piper back. You get people into a standardized health protocol. Guess what? Disease states you're paying the piper back eventually. There's no real health sovereignty then, and where people are free to be healthy.
Right. Yeah, and just free to make their own decisions. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're yeah. When picking dandelion is illegal, only revolutionaries will pick dandelions.
Totally. And what's like dandelion's a great example of like a herb that grows where the people who need it most can access it. Like usually if you're like sick of dandelions in your yard and you're pissed off and you're trying to weed them out and you're trying to put pesticides on them, you're the perfect candidate to have dandelion root medicine.
Yeah, I think of dandelion, it's like the perfect candidate is awake.
Yeah.
Right? Because it's just, I think of it as nutritive all around.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it helps dispel liver heat, which is anger and frustration.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Dandelion, I learned this just a little while ago. Dandelion actually has lactobacilli on it. So I've started putting it into my sauerkrauts and stuff when I do fermentations. Cool. I put in some burdock root and some chicory or some dandelion just to kick up a notch the biodiversity in that ferment.
There's a lot of new science actually coming out around that stuff where it's not just dandelion, but it's this interlayer between the skin of plants and the soil that actually has a lot of the healing benefits within these medicines. There's actually this like microbiome film that these plants have. And they started studying that with seaweeds big time. And they're like, wow, yes, the seaweeds have some nutritives, but it's actually this layer. And so we're learning more. And that's like ourselves too, the layer on our skin, the layer in our gut. Mm-hmm. That's some of the best immune medicine there is. And so, again, that holistic science is starting to show us that the benefit of the whole herb and nothing but the herb. So help your herbalist. It's really there.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because it's not new that dandelion has lactobacillus. It's always had it. It's always helped you with this.
Right. I just learned about it.
Yeah. And which is brilliant.
Yeah. It also happens to be high in inulin, which will feed the fermentation as well, right? So
for sure. Yeah.
Anyway, I want to thank you very much for taking some time to talk to us today.
Well, and thank you for having me. One last thing I want to say is that, like, despite this world having some really crazy things going on with this, yes, we need to get up and fight this. Like, we need to, fight what this is, but we also can't live in fear. And we can't, that just going to put us in a shell shock state.
Right.
So if we're going to actually make the change in the world we want to see happen, we need to be strategic about how we spend our energy and time and resources of ourselves, not to get too frantic and overwhelmed by this stuff, because that easily happens to us.
But also not to confuse ourselves that it's not happening, right?
Yeah.
That there is an agenda to promote money making for people who aren't most of us. Pharmaceuticals are a great way to do that, to keep people controlled. And I think I think herbal medicines, both of us have committed our lives to it being a liberatory process for people, that herbs are this window into liberation around our health. And I see a greater vision where herbs can help heal our communities,
Yeah, well, and that's it. And just for people, if they're overwhelmed, start where you're at. Start exactly where you're at and just work with the people, the herbs, the community around you, and grow that, Yeah. That's where we really will find the change in the world too.
Right. So if you're overwhelmed, start with nervines and anxiolytics, and then move on to figuring out what it is you can do and do it.
The government.
And then write the government when you've kind of calmed down a little bit.
Yeah, and be socially active. Let people know that this plant works for this, and it help connect your community and your tribe with how to take health back into their own hands, to reclaim their own roots.
Literally.
Yeah. And figuratively.
Sweet. Yeah. Okay, well, thank you very much. I've been speaking with Yarrow Willard of Harmonic Arts Botanical Dispensary today. And I'm so grateful for this time. And
all right.
Yeah, have a great day.
Well, thank you, Garlic. Appreciate what you do in the world, and thank you for sharing this information.
Yeah, thanks.
The seeds are lying dormant, it will never end.
All right. So that was Yarrow Willard of Harmonic Arts and myself, your host, Garlic of the Living Medicine Project, chatting about a whole bunch of different topics. I hope you enjoyed our chat. And like so many activisty meetings, I want to end this podcast with some action items. So first, I'd like to invite you to subscribe to the podcast, to check out the show notes, and to explore, listen to past episodes. You can do that by going to livingmedicineproject.com/herbalism as activism. Now, in the show notes, I've added some links for you. First to Yarrow Willard's business, but also to Terry Willard's video, his response to the proposed changes last fall. And then also a link to the Canadian Health Food Association website, so you can read more about the proposed changes. And for what it's worth, they've got a button on there that you can send, a form letter to email to your MP. And I don't know if it's much of an effective action item, but I think it's probably worth doing to see how your MP responds. I'd also suggest actually signing up for the newsletter for the Canadian Health Food Association, because they'll be one of the first organizations to respond with to the next draconian proposal that comes for Health Canada, and we know that it's coming. And that'll help us to have a stronger, faster grassroots response to it as well. Now, the last thing I've included in the show notes it kind of blows my mind. Yarrow shared it with me. It's marketing materials of this high concentration, single constituent nutraceutical, and it's kind of the vision for the nutraceutical pharmaceutical industry for what they have and how they want to modify how we're using herbs and stuff. It's kind of mind-blowing, so go and check that out. So that's it for this edition of Herbalism as Activism. I am your host, Garlic, wishing you strength and wisdom in your stories of healing, justice, resistance, and change.
And Willie says, when you say you are afraid, I understand. In a place where one can rarely smell the land, but the ocean breeze still blows here that will never end. The seeds are lying dormant, it will never end. Willie said,